She went in there loaded up with drugs into a hostile territory where they're very vigilant about drugs. They don't like drugs. And she got caught. And now we're supposed to get her out. And she makes a lot of money, I guess.
That was former President Donald Trump weighing in on Brittney Griner, who is a WNBA star, who has been arrested and in custody in Russia. And we're trying to get her back here in the United States. We're trying to bring her back home. And it's not surprising that Donald Trump seems to be siding with the Russians here. But in doing so, he completely lied and deceived people into thinking what she did was far worse than what's actually going on here. So I want to debunk and dispel some of the garbage that you heard him say. It was his appearance, by the way, on the Clay, Travis, and Buck Sexton podcast where he made those statements. And he bitched in that snippet that she's making a lot of money, right? And he doesn't really know much about anything, but as you guys can probably imagine, the WNBA doesn't bring in the same kind of money the NBA does. And so as a result, the players in the WNBA don't make as much in their salaries. For instance, the WNBA's minimum and maximum salaries are $60,471 and $228,094 respectively. So again, the maximum salary you can make as a WNBA player is $228,094. Those numbers are far below the NBA and what it offers, which pays, by the way, or plays 82 games compared to the WNBA's 36, has a minimum salary of $925,000 and a maximum salary starting at more than $28 million. And of course, they make more money through sponsorships and brand deals and things like that. Now, Griner's salary base was just under the max, so around $220,000. By the way, who cares? Who cares? Like I'm getting into the details because obviously I want to make sure people are informed, but in the grand scheme of things, who cares? She is an American who is imprisoned in Russia and we should get her back. End of story. That's it. There's nothing else to this conversation. Now, Trump also says that she was loaded up with drugs, which is hilarious. I definitely have more drugs in my house right now than Griner had on her, in her bag when she got caught. She had some cannabis oil. In fact, she had 0.7 grams or 0.024 ounces of cannabis oil, which is legal in her home state of Arizona and in many other states in America. Russian media, which reported the amount, said officials considered it significant. Yeah, well, I mean, the country is led by an insane person who invades countries out of nowhere. Like that's who Vladimir Putin is. But Jessica, before we get to more of Donald Trump's nonsense, thoughts?
Yeah, Trump's the guy who plays by the rules. So I can see how this would upset him, right? If you do something bad, you go to prison and be accountable for your actions. That's what he's all about. So I get why he's upset. Yeah, insurrection, drugs, a little bit of weed. Insurrection, a little bit of weed. I don't know, loaded up with drugs. It was a little bit of weed, and I think.
No, I have to jump in. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you want to talk about loaded up with drugs, like Mr. Amphetamine to lose weight guy. Like really, you're gonna talk about loaded up on drugs? Loaded up on drugs.
That is election night thing, whatever you call that. People were definitely giving speeches pretty coked up. Everyone was talking about that. Loaded up with drugs, right up their noses, seriously. I wanna make a prediction though. My prediction is that with all of the golf happening in Saudi Arabia, something's gonna happen. Someone's gonna break some rule, right? And Trump's gonna feel differently about that situation than he does with Brittney Griner, for sure.
He just really hates women and especially women of color. Like if this was some conservative white male, like if this was a baseball player, someone with the MLB who's like a diehard Trump fan, again, a white male who was imprisoned for getting caught with literally 0.024 ounces of cannabis oil. I would venture to say Trump's commentary would be a little different. Okay, I would venture to say that he would not refer to that incident as an athlete who was loaded up on drugs. Come on. Now, Griner, who said that she had a doctor's note for the cannabis oil, explained in a Russian court when she pleaded guilty earlier this month that she had forgotten that it was in her bag and brought it into the country inadvertently. By the way, I don't even care if she did it on purpose. That is not a reason to imprison someone. And because of the political nature, because of the relationship between Russia and the United States, Russia seized on this opportunity to use her as a political prisoner. That is really what's going on here. It's not about drug possession. It's about using her for Russia using her for its own purposes, right? And to be sure, I mean, Russia's trying to get one of its own released from the United States. And we've talked about that guy. He is referred to as the merchant of death because he's an arms dealer to some of the worst people all across the globe. A little similar, not a little, very similar to what the United States does in arming terrible regimes and terrible groups all across the world, including the Saudis, of course. Trump criticized reports that the United States is considering trading notorious Russian arms dealer Victor Bout being held in an American prison to secure the release of Griner, and former US Marine Paul Whelan, who is serving a 16-year sentence in Russia on what US officials call baseless espionage charges. And by the way, his criticism was not grounded in any analysis of the United States foreign policy or concerns about the United States and its approach toward hostages. It was just based on his assessment of Griner as a person. And he thinks, get a load of this, she's very spoiled. Let's watch.
Would you have made, by the way, the offer for Brittney Griner and Victor Bout that Russia has put forward?
We're supposed to get her out for a absolute killer and one of the biggest arms dealers in the world. Killed many Americans, killed many people. And he's gonna get a free card and we're gonna get her. She knew you don't go in there loaded up with drugs. And she admitted it. I assume she admitted it without too much force because it is what it is. And it certainly doesn't seem like a very good trade, does it? He's an absolute one of the worst in the world, and he's gonna be given his freedom because a potentially spoiled person goes into Russia loaded up with drugs.
You inherited $413 million from your daddy and then squandered it and went bankrupt 6 different times. Like, spare me the commentary about other people being spoiled. And by the way, the notion of Griner not being forced to admit guilt. No, the nature of the so-called justice system in Russia required her to admit guilt. So an official admission of guilt was the best option for Griner in both the short and long term. The nature of the Russian legal system meant there was essentially 0 chance she would be acquitted. Pleading not guilty and putting up a fierce defense may have actually led to retribution from Russian authorities while she remains detained. Plus, an admission of guilt is really the only way for a prisoner exchange to happen. So to say like, I don't think she was no, she was. She had to plead guilty in order to have a shot in getting out of that country. Jessica.
Mr. Foreign Policy Genius here. It's amazing, really amazing stuff from Donald Trump. He plays by the rules and he's just a really great deal maker from what I've heard. And he gave himself 2 options in this situation. It was either accept the terms that Russia has put forth or nothing happens at all. Aren't you gonna negotiate? Isn't that what you would do if you were the leader of this country and there was a political prisoner in another country that you want to get out, that people are very upset that is there for very unjust reasons? I don't know, it seems like he didn't read the book, The Art of the Deal, that was written for him. And maybe he should have, and then maybe he would have had a better answer. Maybe he would have had a plan, maybe a counter offer instead of this trade, which he calls a bad trade. Yeah, this guy is the worst. I can't believe we still have to hear about him.
God, he just loves authoritarian regimes. Like, he loves authoritarian leaders. He can't get enough of it. I mean, he's just constantly like filleting them. And if you happen to be a female, and in particular a woman of color who's a political prisoner in one of these, countries that's experiencing authoritarian rule, no, you must be spoiled. You must be spoiled. But I remember his commentary about people like Otto Warmbier in North Korea. Very different, very different. So just pay attention to how the talking points change depending on the identity of the person who's being considered or talked about.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. We really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.